Getting a shrink wrap to work where you can stick one object to another object and make it move seamlessly across the mesh is sometimes a bit more tricky than it first seems. In this video, I'm going to demystify that process. So I'm in a new startup file, I'm in Blender 4.1, I've got my screencast keys down the bottom here, and I'll start off by just selecting everything and deleting it, and instead adding an icosphere, so Shift A to add, or you can go to the add menu up here, mesh, and then icosphere. Down the bottom here, you should have a dialog box. I'll turn this up so it's nice and smooth to something like 5. So we've got a lot of subdivisions there. I'll right click and shade smooth so it looks nice. And now let's add a plane to stick to this ball. So I'll press Shift A to add, mesh, and then plane. I'll move that up in the Z axis, so G then Z, scale it down so we're ready to stick this plane onto this ball. Now just so you can see what's going on, I'll select the ball, go to the materials and just give that a new material and give it a nice sort of blue color. And then I'll go up to the material preview mode so we can easily see it. I think with our ball, I'll turn the roughness right up as well, so it's quite clear. Okay, so if I select on my plane, go across to the modifiers and add the shrink wrap. That's under the deform, or you can just start typing shrink, and there's the shrink wrap just there. So with the shrink wrap on my plane, I want the target to be this big ball here, so I can use the picker here and choose that target. Now instantly we have a problem. If I zoom in a bit, you can see that our plane has inserted itself into the mesh. That's because it hasn't got enough topology or faces in order to stretch itself around. So we need to add some faces to our plane. So I'll turn the shrink wrap off in the viewport display. And what I want to do is add a subdivision surface to add some faces. The shortcut key is Ctrl 2, 3, or 4, depending on how many subdivisions you want. Or you can go to the add modifier and just start typing in sub, and there's the subdivision surface modifier. I'll add a few levels so it smooths it out. If you want to be able to see it, you can go to wireframe and turn off optimal display, and you can actually see how many subdivisions we've got. So now this shape can conform to the shape of the ball. I'll turn back to material preview mode, turn on my shrink wrap, and it's still not working. That's because of the order of these two modifiers. So it's shrink wrapping first, so it's bringing it to this level first, and then subdividing it. We want to subdivide it first, then bring it down to the ball. So I'll bring the subdivision surface modifier above the shrink wrap modifier, and we're starting to get there. Now in the shrink wrap modifier, which is our second modifier, instead of having on surface, which is directly on the surface, we can have it just above the surface. And we can change the offset, just put that up a little bit, depending on the size of your objects. 0.01 should be enough, and that would be 1 centimeter. So if my objects are really big, it should look like it's right on the surface. So it's working relatively well. If I press G to grab now and move it around, it kind of distorts though, and it's not working perfectly. And it's scaling up and squishing around the place and going a bit weird. So I'll undo any of that movement. The reason is, if I come round to here, you can see that the object center is actually quite far away from the surface. So it's starting off here and projecting quite a distance down to these points. And as you can see here, if I bring out our modifiers, its wrap method is nearest surface point. So each of the vertices that are up here are finding the nearest surface point on our ball down here. Well, this can be a lot more effective if we actually bring this down closer. So for now, I'll turn the shrink wrap off, press G to grab in the Z axis and move that right down to about there and turn it back on again. So that's great, and it's doing a much better job of keeping its shape. But as soon as I press G to grab, it will start deforming again. So I'll undo that. What we need to help us is snapping. So I'll undo the movement I just made, and the mesh is still above the ball. If I turn on snapping, and next to snapping, turn on face, and press G to grab, you can see it's starting to snap to our object, but it's a little bit tricky to control. I'll undo that. Under the snapping settings up the top here, I find it's easiest to control if I turn on center. So now when I press G to grab, you can see that the center of my object, or the object origin, is snapping to the surface. So that's great, but I'll undo that. If I also change align rotation to target and allow the snapping to affect the rotation, now when I press G to grab, it rotates to the target as well. So I can move it about and it's right on top of the surface. Now if I turn the shrink wrap modifier on as well and press G to grab, it's sticking really nicely. That's why we use a combination of snapping and shrink wrap when we're doing the shrink wrap method. And of course you need enough topology for it to actually wrap to the object. So I've got a subdivision surface modifier on there, but if you have enough topology in the first place, then you're okay. Incidentally, if you want this to be a nice graphic, if I go across to the shading workspace, and if you've got a PNG or a Photoshop file with a transparent background, you can actually go up to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. If you type in Image, you can find Import, Export Images as Planes. Make sure that's ticked and close this down. Now when I press Shift A to add, under image, you've got this option, images of planes. So if I go into there and choose one of my Grab It Graffiti text files, import as planes, you can see if I press G to grab and bring that up, that it's brought in an image file and taken out the background. I've still got snapping turned on, so it's snapping to my ball. And you can also see what it's done in terms of the text here. It's got the color going into the base color, but also the alpha channel going into the alpha, which is the transparency. I can then just copy the modifiers from this one here to this one here. So if I select both those, but make sure the one I want to copy from, the one that's on the ball here, my original one, make sure that's selected last, so it will be highlighted a slightly more yellow color, and then press Ctrl L for link, or you can find that under Object, Link Transfer Data, and there's copy modifiers there. Now if I hide the original, I can select this one and move it about my ball. And we've got our graffiti on our ball. So hopefully you found that helpful. Do comment below if you've got any questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.